Hi, my name is Rand Yassin from Al Mustansiyah University, Baghdad, Iraq. I'm gonna read to you from page 602 to 609 from Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, The Sacking of Severus Snape. If you wish to leave with your students, we shall not stop you. But if any of you attempt to sabotage our resistance or take arms against us within this castle, then Horace, we duel to kill. Minerva, he said aghast. The time has come for Slytherin House to decide upon its loyalties, interrupted Professor McGonagall. Go and wake up your student, Horace. Harry didn't stay to watch Slughorn Splitter. He and Luna ran after Professor McGonagall, who had taken up a position in the middle of the corridor and raised her wand. Pierre Totem. Oh, for heaven's sake, Filch, not now. The eighth caretaker have just come hobbling into view, shouting, "Students are in bed, students in the corridors." "There you're supposed to be, you blithering idiot," shouted McGonagall. "Now, go and do something constructive. Find Peeves." "Peeves?" stammered Filch, as he has never heard the name before. "Yes, Peeves, you fool, Peeves. Haven't you been complaining about him for a quarter of a century? Go and fetch him at once." Filch evidently thought Professor McGonagall had taken leave for her senses, but hobbled away, hunch-shouldered, muttering under his breath. "And now, Pierre Totem Locomoto," cried Professor McGonagall, and all along the corridor the statues and suit of armor jumped down from their place. And from the echoing crashes from the floor above and below, Harry knew that their fellows throughout the castle and done the same. "Hogwarts is threatened," shouted Professor McGonagall. "Mount the boundaries. Protect us. Do your duty to our school." Clittering and yelling, the horde of the moving statues stampeded past Harry. Some of them smaller, others larger than life. There were animals too, and the clerk in suits of armor brandished swords and spiked balls on chains. "And now, Potter," said McGonagall, "you and Miss Lovegood had better return to your friends and bring them to the Grey Hall. I shall rouse the other Gryffindors." They parted at the top of the next staircase, Harry and Luna running back toward the concealed entrance to the room of requirement. As they ran, they met crowds of students, most wearing traveling cloaks over their pajamas, being shepherded down to the Grey Hall by teachers and prefects. "And now, oh, that was Potter? Harry Potter. It was him, I swear, I just saw him." But Harry didn't look back, and at last they reached the entrance to the room of requirement. Harry leaned against the enchanted wall, which opened to admit them, and he and Luna sped back down to the staircase. What? As the room came into view, Harry slipped down a few stairs in shock. It was packed, far more crowded than when he had last been in there. Kingsley and Lupin were looking up at him, as were Oliver Wood, Katie Bell, Angelina Johnson, and Alicia Spinnet, Bill and Fleur, and Mr. and Mrs. Weasley. "Harry, what's happening?" said Lupin, meeting him at the foot of the stairs. "Voldemort on his way. They are barricading the school. Snape's run for it." "What are you doing here? How did you know?" "We sent messages to the rest of the Dumbledore army," Fred explained. "You couldn't expect everyone to miss the fun, Harry. And the DA let the Order of the Phoenix know. And it's all kind of snowballed." "What first, Harry?" called George. "What's going on?" "They are evacuating the younger kids and everyone's meeting in the Great Hall to get organized," Harry said. "We're fighting." There was a great roar and a surge toward the foot of the stairs. He had pressed back against the wall as they ran past him. The mangled members of the Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore's army, and Harry's old Quidditch team, all with their wands drawn, heading up to the main castle. "Come on, Luna," Dean called as he passed. Holding out his free hand, she took it and followed him back to the stairs. The crowd was thinning. Only a little knot of people remained below in the room of requirement. Harry joined them. Mr. Weasley Mrs. Weasley was struggling with Jenny. Around them stood Lupin, Fred, George, Bill, and Fleur. "You are underage!" Mrs. Weasley shouted at her daughter as Harry approached. "I won't permit it. The boys, yes, but you haven't to go home." "I won't." Jenny's hair flew as she pulled her arm out of her mother's grip. "I'm in Dumbledore's army. A teenager gang that's about to take him on, which no one else had dared to do," said Fred. "She's 16, shouted Mrs. Weasley. "She's not old enough." "What you two were thinking bringing her here with you?" Fred and George looked slightly ashamed of themselves. "Mom's right, Jenny," said Bill gently. "You can't do this. Everyone underage will have to leave. It's only right." "I won't go home," Jenny shouted, angry, tears sparkling in her eyes. "My whole family is here. I can't stand waiting there alone and not knowing." And her eyes met Harry's for the first time. She looked at him beseechingly, but he shook his head and she turned away bitterly. "Fine," she said, staring at the entrance of the tunnel back to the Hog's Head. "I'll say goodbye now, then," and there was a scuffling and a great thump. Someone else had climbed out of the tunnel, overbalanced slightly, and fallen. He pulled himself up on the nearest chair, looked around through lopsided, horn-rimmed glasses, and said, "Am I too late? Has it started? I only just found out, so I Percy splattered into silence. Evidently, he had not expected to run into most of his family. There was a long moment of astonishment, broken by Fleur turning to Lupin and saying in a wildly transparent attempt to break the tension, "So, how is little Teddy?" Lupin blinked at her, startled. The silence between the Weasleys seemed to be solidifying like ice. Oh yes, he's fine," Lupin said loudly. "Yes, Tonks is with him." At her mother's, Percy and the other Weasleys were still staring at one another, frozen. "Here, I've got a picture," Lupin shouted, pulling a photograph from inside his jacket and showing it to Fleur and Harry, who saw a tiny baby with a tuft of bright turquoise hair, waving fat fists at the camera. "I was a fool," Percy roared so loudly that Lupin nearly dropped his photograph. "I was an idiot. I was a pompous brat. I was a ministry-loving family showing power-hungry moron," said Fred. Percy swallowed. "Yes, I was." "Well, you can't say fairer than that," said Fred, holding out his hand to Percy. Mrs. Weasley burst into tears. She ran forward, pushed Fred aside, and pulled Percy into a strangling hug, while he patted her on the back, his eyes on his father. "I'm sorry, Dad," Percy said. Mr. Weasley blinked rather rapidly. Then he too hurried to hug his son. "What made you see sense, Pierce?" inquired George. "It's been coming for a while," said Percy, mopping his eyes under his glasses with a corner of his traveling clock. "But I had to find out. And it's not easy at the ministry. They are imprisoning traitors all the time. I managed to make contact with Britherforth, and he tipped me off 10 minutes ago that Hogwarts was going to make a fight of it, so here I am." "Well, we do look to our prefects to take a lead at times such these," said George, in a good imitation of Percy's most pompous manner. "Now, let's go upstairs and fight, or the good Death Eaters I'll be taken." "So, you are my sister-in-law now," said Percy, shaking hands with Fleur, as they hurried off towards the staircase with Bill, Fred, and George. "Jenny," barked Mrs. Weasley. Jenny had been attempting under the cover of this reconciliation to sneak upstairs too. "Molly, how about this?" said Lupin. "Why doesn't Jenny stay here? Then at least she'll be on the scene and knowing what's going on, but she won't be in the middle of the fighting. That's a good idea, said Mr. Weasley firmly. Jenny, you stay here in this room, you hear me? Jenny didn't seem to like the idea, but under her father's unusually stern gaze, she nodded. Mr. and Mrs. Weasley and Lupin headed off for the stairs as well. Where's Ron? Asked Harry. Where's Hermione? They must have gone up to the Great Hall already, Mr. Weasley called over his shoulder. I didn't see them pass me, said Harry. They said something about a bathroom, said Jenny. Not long after you left. A bathroom? Harry strode across the room to open door leading to the room of requirement and checked the bathroom beyond. It was empty. You sure they said bath? But then his car stirred and the room of requirement vanished. He was looking through the high wrought iron gates with winged boars on pillars at each side, looking through the dark grounds toward the castle, which ablaze with light. Nagini lay draped over his shoulders. He was possessed of the cold, cruel sense of purpose that preceded murder. Chapter 31. The Battle of Hogwarts. The enchanted ceiling of the Great Hall was dark and scattered with stars, and below it the 4 long house tables were lined with disheveled students, some in traveling cloaks, others in dressing gowns. Here and there shone the barely white figures of the school ghosts. Every eye, living and dead, was fixed upon Professor McGonagall, who was speaking from the raised platform at the top of the hall. Behind her stood the remaining teachers, including Philomena, Centaur, Firenze, and the members of the Order of the Phoenix who had arrived to fight. Evacuation will be overseen by Mr. Filch and Madame Pomfrey, prefects. When I give the word, you will organize your house and take your charges in the orderly fashion of the evacuation point. Many of the students looked petrified. However, as Harry skirted the walls, scanning the Gryffindor table for Ron and Hermione, Erin Macmillan stood up at the Hufflepuff table and shouted, "And what if we want to stay and fight?" There was a smattering of applause. "If you were of age, you may stay," said Professor McGonagall. "What about our things?" called a girl in the Ravenclaw table. "Our trunks, our owls." "We have no time for collect possessions," said Professor McGonagall. "The important thing is to get you out of here safely," said Professor McGonagall. "Where's Professor Snape?" shouted a girl from the Slytherin table. "He has, to use the common phrase, done a bunk," replied Professor McGonagall, and a great cheer erupted from the Gryffindors, Hufflepuffs, and Ravenclaws. Harry moved up to the hall alongside the Gryffindor table, still looking for Ron and Hermione. As he passed, faces turned in his direction, and a great deal of whispering broke out in his wake. "We have already placed protection around the castle," Professor McGonagall was saying, "but it's unlikely to hold for very long unless we reinforce it. I must ask you, therefore, you move quickly and calmly and do as your prefects." But her final words were drowned as a different voice echoed throughout the hall. It was high, cold, and clear. There was no telling from where it came. It seemed to issue from the walls themselves, like the monster it had once commanded. It might have lain dormant there for centuries. "I know that you are preparing to fight," there was screamed among the students, some of whom clutched each other, looking around in terror for the source of the sound. "Your efforts are futile. You cannot fight me. I don't want to kill you. I have a great respect for the teachers of Hogwarts. I don't want to spill magical blood."